Have you ever spent 4 years being the only person in a building who could speak two languages, not Spanish and English, but doctor and developer, and then watched your boss hand your job to someone whose biggest qualification was a LinkedIn headline? Not hypothetically. Not in a what-if kind of scenario. I mean, someone looked at the person holding two worlds together and said, "You answer phones." Yeah, that was my Tuesday. And by Friday, patients were paying for it. 3 weeks from now, I would be standing in Conference Room A on the 4th floor of Summit Health Technologies, downtown Denver, Lodo District, with a manila folder in my lap and 5 pieces of evidence lined up like bullets in a chamber. Across the table, my boss would be sitting with the posture of a man who just realized his parachute was actually a fitted sheet. The vice president of product would be staring at him the way you stare at someone who just backed into your car and is trying to explain how it was the car's fault. And I would be calm, eerily calm. The kind of calm that comes from being underestimated for so long that when you finally stand up, the room doesn't know what to do with you. But that was 3 weeks from now. Let me start at the beginning. The beginning was a Tuesday. Ray Delgado was the one who tipped me off. Ray, 56 years old, 12 years at Summit. The kind of man who called everyone by their last name and remembered your coffee order from 3 years ago, even if you changed it twice since then. He stopped me in the hallway outside Conference Room B, coffee in one hand, the other hand doing that thing where he rubs the back of his neck like he is trying to sand down bad news before delivering it. "Gallagher, you got a minute?" "Depends on what the minute costs me." They gave the client success director spot to the outside hire. Aiden something, Cross, comes from some startup in Portland. I stood there, fluorescent lights humming that specific frequency that makes you feel like you are being slowly microwaved. Gray carpet that smelled like it had been cleaned with corporate indifference, and a bulk discount detergent that promised freshness and delivered absolutely nothing resembling it. I had applied for that position 7 weeks earlier. I had been doing that job, the actual work, the daily reality of it, without the title and without the salary for over 2 years. 2 years of bridging the gap between software engineers who spoke in code and doctors who spoke in diagnoses. 2 years of translating panic into patches and patches into plain English. 2 years of being the person everyone called when something broke, which was often, and which usually happened at 3 in the morning, which was always. Ray watched my face. He had the expression of a man who had seen 12 years of Summit's decisions and stopped being surprised by any of them, but had not stopped being disappointed. "You okay?" "I am processing, Ray." My phone buzzed. Patrick Doan, my boss. 2 words on the screen that landed like a summons. "Gallagher, my office. Now." I looked at Ray. Ray looked at my phone. Then he looked back at me with eyes that said everything his mouth would not. 12 years of corporate nonsense had taught Ray Delgado exactly when to speak and when to just hand someone their coffee and step aside. He handed me his coffee. "You are going to need this more than I do." He was right. He usually was. That was the thing about Ray. He was never the loudest person in the room. He was just always the most correct. I took the cup. I did not drink it. I just held it. Because sometimes you need something in your hands when you are walking toward a conversation that is about to rearrange your entire understanding of your own value. The hallway to Patrick's office was 62 steps. I know because I counted them once during a particularly boring Tuesday 3 years ago, and some information, once it enters your brain, simply refuses to leave. Like the lyrics to a cereal commercial from 1997, or the exact number of steps between your desk and the office of a man who is about to tell you that you answer phones. 62 steps, fluorescent lights, gray carpet, the faint sound of someone's playlist leaking through earbuds 2 cubicles over, something acoustic and optimistic, which felt almost offensive given the circumstances. I passed the break room. I passed the supply closet that always smelled vaguely of toner and regret. I passed desk 14, which had been empty for 3 months since Carla, in accounts receivable, left for a remote position. Nobody had bothered to remove her mug from the shelf above it. It said "World's Okayest Accountant." Every morning I walked past that mug and thought, at least somebody in this building had an honest job title. And then I was there, Patrick Doan's corner office. Not a corner because he earned it. A corner because the previous director had the corner and Patrick kept the furniture the way some people keep a previous tenant's curtains. Not out of taste. Out of inertia. His name was... Well, his name is Patrick. Patrick Doan. I am not protecting his identity. I just had to take a breath before saying it out loud because even now, months later, the name tastes like reheated fish in a shared microwave. Patrick was the Regional Client Operations Director at Summit Health Technologies, managed a team of 8, had been with the company 2 years, which was 2 years longer than anyone in the building wanted him there. The man came from sales. Sales. He transferred into client operations because somebody 3 levels above us decided that cross-functional leadership was the future of innovation. Patrick's idea of healthcare technology was making sure his Monday morning slide deck had a stock photo of a stethoscope on it. The door to his office was open. That told me everything. When Patrick wanted to have a real conversation, the door was closed. When he wanted to deliver a verdict, he left it open so everyone could hear you not arguing. I walked in. Did not knock. The door was open, which meant this was not a conversation. It was a sentencing. Patrick's corner office had the energy of a man who had inherited nice furniture and assumed that made him important. Mahogany desk that the previous director had picked out. Leather chair that the previous director had broken in. A framed photo of Patrick shaking hands with someone at a conference, both of them smiling the way people smile when neither one remembers the other's name. On the wall behind him, a motivational poster featuring a mountain and the word vision in a font that had no business being that confident. Gallagher, sit down. He did not offer me coffee. He did not close the door. 2 things that, separately, mean nothing. Together, they mean you are about to be told something that your boss wants the hallway to overhear. I sat, hands in my lap, face doing absolutely nothing, which took more energy than you would think. We have selected Aiden Cross for the Client Success Director position. He brings the executive presence we need. Background in client success strategy, built a retention program at a tech startup in Portland that reduced churn by 19%. Sharp communicator. The kind of person clients see and think, okay, this company knows what it is doing. I sat there. My hands did not move. You are a great worker, Gallagher, solid support specialist. But this role needs strategic vision, big picture thinking. Client success is not about answering tickets. It is about shaping relationships at the executive level. He leaned forward. This is the part where Patrick thought he was being generous. This is the part where he thought he was mentoring me. You could see it in his face, this expression of a man who believed he was handing down wisdom when he was actually handing me a grenade with the pin already pulled. Support answers phones. Directors shape strategy. Do not confuse the two. Support answers phones. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I sat with it for about 3 seconds. And in those 3 seconds, my brain did the math faster than any spreadsheet Patrick would ever open, assuming he could find the spreadsheet, which historically was not guaranteed. 4 years and 3 months I had been at Summit Health Technologies. Salary, $49,600. The Client Success Director position paid $78,500. The market rate for someone doing what I actually did every day, not my title, what I actually did, was somewhere between $78,000 and $85,000. I had been doing an $80,000 job for $49,600 and a pat on the back that never arrived. And this man who once asked me what HIPAA stood for during a client call and not in a quiz me kind of way, more in a genuine confusion kind of way that made the client go silent for 4 full seconds. This man told me I answered phones. So I smiled, not a happy smile, not a polite smile, the kind of smile that should have made him very, very nervous if he had been paying any attention at all. But Patrick was not paying attention. Patrick was never paying attention. That was sort of the whole point. Thanks for letting me know, I said. I stood up, grabbed my bag from my desk, walked out the front door of Summit Health Technologies into the Denver afternoon. Late September. That specific Colorado sunlight that makes everything look like it has been color-corrected by someone who actually knows what they are doing, unlike Patrick, who once spent 20 minutes trying to change the font on a PDF and ended up deleting the entire file. I got into my 2019 Honda Civic with the cracked windshield from that stupid parking spot by the loading dock where delivery trucks swing too wide. The windshield had a crack that started small in March, and by September had traveled halfway across the glass like it was making a point about things that get ignored too long. I drove south on Broadway, hit a red light at Broadway and Colfax, which, if you know Denver, you know that intersection has a personality. loud, complicated. The kind of place where a man playing saxophone on one corner coexists with a dispensary on the other and somehow it all works. I sat at that red light, and I set an alarm on my phone. 7:15 a.m., Monday through Friday. Below it, I typed 3 words in the label field. 8 to 5. Let me be clear about what those 3 words meant. They did not mean I was going to sabotage anything. They did not mean I was going to delete files or change passwords or lock anyone out of anything. They meant I was going to do my job. My actual, contractual, legally documented job. Client support specialist. Core hours 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. That was what Summit Health Technologies paid me $49,600 a year to do. And starting tomorrow, that was exactly what they were going to get. Not a minute more, not a phone call after hours, not a 3 a.m. emergency patch, not a Saturday spent translating a surgeon's frustration into a server reboot. $49,600 worth of work, exactly what they paid for. The light turned green. I drove home, and for the first time in 4 years and 3 months, I did not check my work phone when I walked through the door. I set it on the kitchen counter, screen up, and I left it there like a thing that belonged to someone else. Because in a way, it did. It belonged to the old Nora, the one who said yes to everything and never asked what it cost her. That Nora had just clocked out for the last time, she just did not know it yet. Let me explain what Patrick did not understand. Because it is the same thing a lot of people do not understand about the person in the building who translates the untranslatable. When translation works, nobody notices. That is the whole design. You do not thank the bridge for not collapsing. You do not send a fruit basket to the person who spent 45 minutes on the phone at 2 a.m, turning a surgeon's panic into a software patch so that 14 clinics could open on time. You just cross the bridge and keep walking. And you definitely do not think about the woman who has been awake since 2:53 a.m. in flannel pants and a college sweatshirt from a school she did not even graduate from, sitting on her bedroom floor with a laptop balanced on a stack of textbooks because her desk was covered in draft pages of a book she was writing about this exact kind of invisible labor. That was me. 3 weeks before Patrick's little speech. A Wednesday. The monitoring dashboard pinged at 2:53 a.m. Mountain West Medical, our biggest client. $23,800 a month. Their prescription management system had thrown a sync error between the primary database and the backup. Not a red alert, yellow, the kind of yellow that most people would sleep through. But yellow at 2:53 a.m. becomes red by 6 a.m. if nobody touches it. And red means the system that tells doctors what medication to prescribe and at what dosage starts showing yesterday's data instead of today's. And yesterday's data in a hospital is not just outdated, it is dangerous. I fixed the sync in 28 minutes, rerouted the replication pathway, cleared the cache backlog, manually verified the data integrity across both nodes. But here is the part that no software engineer in my building could have done, the part that made me something other than a support specialist who answers phones. While the sync was running, I called the night shift charge nurse at Mountain West's main campus. Her name was Gloria. She had been a nurse for 31 years and had exactly 0 patience for technology and exactly infinite patience for patients, which if you think about it, is the correct ratio. Gloria, this is Nora from Summit. Your prescription system is going to show a brief interruption in about 4 minutes. It will look like the database is offline, but it is not. It is resyncing. If any of your nurses need to pull a prescription during that window, they can use the manual override on the backup terminal in the East Wing station. The code is the same one from last month. Do you need me to walk you through it? Honey, I have been using that backup terminal since before your system existed, but thank you for calling. The last tech person who called me during an outage spent 10 minutes explaining what an API was, and I hung up on him. That was it. That was the job Patrick did not see. Not just fixing the server, calling Gloria at 3 a.m. and speaking her language. Not tech language, nurse language. The language of someone who has a patient in room 412 who needs their medication updated and does not care whether the issue is a cache backlog or a replication error or a butterfly flapping its wings in a server room in Friend. Virginia, she cares about the patient. And I was the person who could stand between her world and mine and make both of them work. 28 minutes of work that kept 14 clinics running and approximately 900 patients' prescription data accurate and current. My compensation for those 28 minutes? Nothing. Not overtime. Not comp time. Not even a "hey, I saw the alert got resolved." Nothing. Patrick walked past my desk at 9:30 that morning, said morning, and kept walking. The way you walk past a thermostat. The way you walk past a light switch. The way you walk past every invisible thing that makes your world function without ever once asking how. And that was a quiet week. Dr. Ruth Nakamura was the only person who came close to saying it out loud. Dr. Nakamura was the chief medical officer at Mountain West Medical, 61 years old. Gray bob she had been wearing the same way since, I suspect, roughly 2004. The kind of doctor who shook your hand like a person and not a title, and who remembered the name of every nurse on every floor of every clinic in her network. When she talked to you, she looked at you, not past you, not at her phone, at you. Like you were the only appointment on her calendar, even when you were not on her calendar at all. That Saturday before Patrick's speech, Dr. Nakamura called me, not the support line, not Patrick, me. Because Mountain West was rolling out a new patient records module, and she needed coordination with our side. She needed someone who could explain to her staff what the update would change, how it would affect their workflow, and what to do if something went wrong, in their language, not ours. I spent 5 hours on my Saturday, sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop and a pot of green tea that went cold twice because I kept forgetting to drink it. 5 hours walking Dr. Nakamura and her team through every change, every screen, every potential hiccup, translating every piece of technical documentation into something a nurse or a physician could actually use. At the end of the call, Dr. Nakamura said something I have not forgotten. Her voice was quiet, direct, the way she said everything. "You are the only person who speaks both our languages, Nora." She meant it, and she was right. And the person who spoke both languages was being paid $49,600 a year to answer phones. Monday morning, Patrick did not mention it. Did not ask about my weekend. Did not know Dr. Nakamura had called. Patrick was too busy rehearsing his Tuesday presentation, the one with 11 slides and 9 typos and a stock photo of a stethoscope. I had been keeping a log, not because I am paranoid, because I am organized, and organized people track things. It is the same reason I label my leftovers with the date and the contents. Not because I think someone is going to steal my Tuesday pasta. Because when you live alone and your refrigerator starts looking like a science experiment, you want documentation. Over the past 8 months, 137 after-hours interventions, nights, weekends, holidays, each one time-stamped in a spreadsheet I kept on my personal laptop because I learned early in my career that if it is not written down, it did not happen. And if it did happen but nobody wrote it down, it definitely did not happen to the person who benefited from it most. 137 times. The Christmas Eve one was my personal favorite, Pinecrest Clinic, our second largest client, $18,500 a month. Their patient portal threw a critical authentication error at 11:20 p.m. on December 24th. Patients trying to access their health records were getting locked out entirely. Not a minor inconvenience when you consider that some of those patients were checking medication interactions before family dinners, where Aunt Somebody was going to insist they try her famous eggnog despite being on blood thinners. I spent 2 hours and 15 minutes on a remote session while my roommate watched Home Alone in the living room. I could hear Kevin McAllister screaming through the wall every time a server diagnostic completed. By the time I finished, Kevin had already defeated the wet bandits. My roommate had fallen asleep on the couch with a plate of cookies on her stomach, and I had a stiff neck, a cold cup of chamomile, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that 6,000 patients would wake up Christmas morning with access to their medical records. My compensation for those 2 hours and 15 minutes on Christmas Eve? Nothing. Not overtime pay, not comp time. Not even a message that said, "Hey Gallagher, saw the Pinecrest alert, got resolved, thanks for giving up your Christmas Eve." Nothing. Thanksgiving was its own special category. Mountain West's backup system flagged a corruption warning at 7:40 a.m., the Sunday of Thanksgiving weekend. I spent 3 hours that morning rebuilding the backup integrity, while the rest of Denver was presumably eating leftover turkey sandwiches and arguing about football. By the time I finished, my roommate had eaten the last of the pumpkin pie, which she later claimed she thought I did not want. She was wrong. I wanted that pie. I earned that pie. I just was not there to defend it because I was busy making sure a hospital's backup system did not collapse on a holiday weekend. 137 times I answered the phone or saw the alert or opened my laptop at some ungodly hour and fixed something that nobody else in the building knew how to fix. And 0 times, anyone asked if maybe, just maybe, I should be compensated for it. Dr. Nakamura came close. She was the only person on the client side who acknowledged what I did outside business hours. But even she did not know the full scope. She knew about her calls. She did not know about the 130 others. Now, here is a detail that matters later, so tuck it away somewhere safe. 3 months before all of this, 3 months before Patrick sat in his inherited corner office and told me I answer phones, he filed his annual performance review of me with Human Resources. Standard form, 5 pages. I know what it said because I requested a copy, which I am entitled to under company policy. Something Patrick clearly did not know, because when I asked Human Resources, they confirmed it in about 4 seconds, with the energy of people who had answered this question before and were mildly annoyed that managers kept being surprised by it. Page 2. Third paragraph. Patrick's own words. Typed with his own 2 fingers because the man hunted and pecked at a keyboard like a bird with a personal vendetta against the letter Q. Nora Gallagher is the single most indispensable member of the client-facing team. Her ability to bridge the gap between our technical team and healthcare clients is irreplaceable. Her institutional knowledge and client relationships represent a significant competitive advantage for Summit Health Technologies. Irreplaceable. He wrote that, his signature at the bottom of the page in that tight, careful handwriting of a man who signs things without reading them but wants the signature to look like he did, filed with Human Resources, time-stamped, documented, permanent. 3 months before telling me I answer phones, Patrick Doan put his name on a document that called me irreplaceable, and I do not think he remembered writing it. I do not think he remembered what the word meant. I do not think Patrick thought about me at all, except when something broke and he needed it to stop being broken, which is exactly how you think about a light switch. You flip it, the lights come on. You never once consider what happens inside the wall. I printed that page, put it in a folder, put the folder in the bottom drawer of my desk, not because I had a plan, not yet, but some things you keep, like receipts, like screenshots, like the memory of your boss writing the word irreplaceable 3 months before telling you that support answers phones. Some words, once they are in writing, stop being words. They become something else entirely. They become evidence. Aiden Cross showed up that Monday. Good handshake. Clean laptop bag, the kind with a dedicated pocket for a charger and a sleeve for a tablet that probably cost more than my first month's rent at my first apartment. He had the confidence of a man whose resume had bullet points that all started with action verbs and ended with percentages, built a retention program, reduced churn by 19%, implemented a client success framework, whatever that means. I have been in this industry for over 4 years, and I still do not know what a client success framework is, but I am fairly certain it involves a spreadsheet with color coding and at least one meeting that could have been an email. Aiden was not terrible. I want to be clear about that because what comes next might make you think I am bitter, and I need you to understand the difference between bitter and accurate. He was smart. He presented well. He had the kind of jawline that made him look competent even when he was confused, which is a genuine superpower in corporate America. And on his second day, he asked me to walk him through the client systems. Sure, I said, because that is what I do. I translate, I bridge, I make things make sense for people who are standing on the wrong side of a language they do not speak. We sat in the small conference room on the 3rd floor, the one with the window that overlooks the parking garage and has a whiteboard that still had notes from a brainstorming session in July that nobody erased because nobody could figure out whose brainstorm it was or whether the ideas were still relevant. They were not. But the whiteboard did not know that. I walked Aiden through everything. The ticketing system and how it was supposed to work versus how it actually worked, which were 2 different things in the way that a restaurant menu and what they actually have in the kitchen are 2 different things. The escalation protocols, which sounded organized on paper but in practice relied heavily on knowing which clients would tolerate a 24-hour response window and which ones would call the chief executive officer of Summit directly if they did not hear back in 2 hours. Then the quirks. Every client had them. Mountain West Medical only accepted software updates on Tuesday nights. Not Monday, not Wednesday, Tuesday. Because Tuesday night was when their patient volume dipped lowest, and Dr. Nakamura had determined 3 years ago that the risk window for a system update was smallest between 11 p.m. Tuesday and 4 a.m. Wednesday. This was not written in any manual. This was not documented in any shared drive. This lived in my head because Dr. Nakamura told me during a phone call 2 years ago, and I remembered it the way you remember that your best friend is allergic to shellfish. You just know. Pinecrest Clinic's IT manager, Dave Kowalski, only responded via Slack. Never email, never phone. You could call Dave 14 times and leave 14 voicemails, and he would respond to none of them. But send him a Slack message, even at midnight, and he would reply within 3 minutes with a thumbs-up emoji and whatever information you needed. Nobody knew why. I once asked him, and he said, "I just do not like phones," which I respected because honestly, who does? And then the big one. The one that mattered. The one that would, in about 10 days, blow a hole in Summit's operations so large you could drive an ambulance through it, which, given that we were a healthcare technology company, was almost poetically appropriate. Mountain West's prescription management system had a known synchronization bug. Every 48 hours, the sync between the primary database and the backup would quietly stall unless someone manually restarted the replication service. Not a dramatic crash, not a red alert, a silent, invisible drift where the backup would slowly fall behind the primary until the gap became large enough to trigger a full system conflict. When that happened, the prescription data that doctors relied on to verify dosages, check interactions, and confirm patient histories would show information that was 2 days old. In a hospital, where 2-day-old data is not just inconvenient, it is the kind of thing that keeps medical directors awake at night. I discovered this bug 14 months ago, reported it to our engineering team, got a ticket number, ticket 47218. I still remember it the way you remember your childhood phone number, not because you need it, but because it is permanently tattooed on some neglected corner of your brain. Engineering acknowledged the ticket, assigned it to the backlog, and that was the last anyone heard of it. So I just restarted the replication service myself. Every 48 hours. Like watering a plant that would die if you forgot. Except this plant served 14 clinics and approximately 900 patients whose medication data depended on a manual restart performed by a woman in flannel pants at her kitchen table every other evening. Documented nowhere. Existing only in my head. The kind of institutional knowledge that does not transfer through onboarding slides or iPad notes or a confident nod from a man with a good jawline. Aiden typed on his laptop. Nodded along, asked a few smart questions to his credit, and when I finished, he closed his laptop, looked at me with the expression of a man who had just been handed directions to a city he had never visited and believed the map was the same as the territory. "Got it," he said. He did not got it. And here is the thing about institutional knowledge that nobody tells you during the hiring process. You cannot download it. You cannot copy-paste 4 years of 3 a.m. phone calls and holiday emergencies and silent bug fixes into a clean laptop with a fresh screen protector. Institutional knowledge is not information, it is scar tissue. It is the calluses you build from holding something together so long that your hands remember the shape, even when your brain is asleep. Aiden had the map, I had the scars. And Summit Health Technologies was about to find out which one keeps the lights on. That Thursday, my sister Chloe called. Now, this has nothing to do with the story, but it also has everything to do with the story. Depends on how you look at it. Chloe is 3 years younger than me, lives in Fort Collins, about an hour north of Denver on a good traffic day, and approximately 700 years north on a bad one because the stretch of Interstate 25 between Denver and Fort Collins was apparently designed by someone who wanted to test the limits of human patience. She has 2 kids, a husband named Trevor who teaches high school math and coaches girls volleyball with the kind of genuine enthusiasm that makes you wonder if some people were just born with more optimism than the rest of us, and a deep spiritual belief that any task requiring patience, phone calls, or reading anything longer than a text message is Nora's job. Not because she is lazy. Chloe works hard. She manages the front office at a veterinary clinic. She has handled a Labrador having a seizure in the waiting room with more composure than most people handle a delayed flight. She just decided somewhere around 2017 that I am the one who is good at that stuff. That stuff being anything that involves fine print, hold music, or the phrase, "Your call is important to us." Good at it is code for, "I do not want to do it, and you will not say no." Hey Nor, I need a favor. Liam's got that weird rash again, and I'm trying to figure out if the new insurance covers the dermatologist Dr. Perry referred us to. But the plan documents are like 40 pages, and I cannot tell if he is in-network or adjacent network or whatever the third option is. Can you just look at it and tell me what it means? Chloe, I cannot do this one. You are going to have to figure it out yourself. Silence. The kind of silence that has a texture, like corduroy, scratchy, and judgmental. What has gotten into you? Nothing got into me, Chloe. Something got out of me. More silence. Then a small, confused laugh that was not really a laugh. More of an exhale that wanted to be a laugh, but did not have the confidence. You are always the one who, you know this stuff. You understand insurance. I do not even know what adjacent network means. Google it, Chloe. You are smarter than you think. I hung up. My hands were shaking, which was ridiculous. I had just told my sister to read a document. You would think I had defused a bomb, or refused to defuse one, or told someone whose bomb I had been defusing for years that maybe, just maybe, they could learn to defuse their own bombs. But here is the thing they do not tell you about being the reliable one, the translator, the person who makes things make sense for everyone else. The first time you stop, people act like you have committed a felony. Not a small one, a federal one, with intent and a motive, and a prosecutor who looks suspiciously like your younger sister asking, "What has gotten into you?" I stood in my kitchen. The overhead light had that faint flicker it does when the bulb is thinking about dying but is not committed yet. My apartment in Capitol Hill, Denver. Second floor. The kind of apartment that costs $1,400 a month and gives you exactly enough space to have opinions about furniture, but not enough space to actually own any. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop. Not the work laptop, my personal one, and I opened my employment contract with Summit Health Technologies. Read the whole thing. Took 11 minutes. Which is 11 minutes longer than Patrick has ever spent reading it, and approximately 11 minutes longer than Patrick has spent reading anything that was not a sales deck or a lunch menu. Job title: Client Support Specialist. Core hours: 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. Responsibilities: client communication and support coordination, ticket management and escalation documentation, vendor and technical team liaison, reporting to Regional Client Operations Director. That was it. 4 lines. My entire contractual obligation to Summit Health Technologies, summarized in fewer words than a decent pasta recipe. Nowhere, and I mean nowhere, did it say answer monitoring alerts at 3 in the morning. Nowhere did it say spend your Saturdays coordinating system updates with chief medical officers. Nowhere did it say manually restart a prescription database every 48 hours because engineering could not be bothered to fix a bug they acknowledged 14 months ago. Nowhere did it say translate a surgeon's panic at 3 a.m. into a server patch. Nowhere did it say serve as the only person in the entire building who speaks both doctor and developer while being paid $28,400 less than the job is worth. Nowhere did it say be the bridge and also be invisible. I closed the laptop, and I made myself pasta. Aglio e olio, the real kind, 6 cloves of garlic, sliced thin, good olive oil, the kind that costs $11 and makes you feel like you made a responsible adult decision even though you are eating pasta alone at 10 p.m. on a Thursday, red pepper flakes, a handful of parsley, and the kind of patience you only have when you have just made a decision that is going to change everything. Low heat. Do not rush the garlic. Let it go golden, not brown. Brown garlic is bitter garlic, and I had enough bitterness for one evening. This has nothing to do with the story, but that was the best pasta I have ever made. And some moments you just remember. Not the victories, not the defeats. The pasta you made at 10 p.m. on a Thursday when your whole life was about to change. After the pasta, and I cannot stress enough how good that pasta was. I sat back down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. Not the work laptop, mine. The one with the cracked corner from when I dropped it getting out of a rideshare in 2022, and the sticker on the back that says, "I speak fluent sarcasm," which my roommate gave me as a joke, but which, professionally speaking, turned out to be more accurate than either of us intended. I opened a document I had been working on for 8 months. Not a spreadsheet, not a report, not a ticket, a book. The working title was Lost in Translation, When Tech Meets Healthcare, 6 chapters written, roughly 42,000 words. A passion project that lived in the hours between dinner and sleep, the hours that technically belonged to me but that Summit Health Technologies had been borrowing without permission for 4 years and 3 months. The book was about the thing nobody talks about in healthcare technology. Not the algorithms, not the platforms. Not the innovation or the disruption or whatever buzzword was trending on conference keynote slides that year. It was about the people in between, the translators. The ones who stand in the gap between a software engineer who thinks in systems and a nurse who thinks in patients and somehow make both of them feel understood. The invisible labor of bridging 2 worlds that speak entirely different languages and convincing each one that the other is not the enemy. This has nothing to do with the story, except it does. It has everything to do with it, because the book was about me. It was about every 3 a.m. phone call and every Saturday coordination session, and every time I said the words, "Let me explain that differently," and watch someone's face go from confusion to comprehension. It was about the work that does not show up on performance metrics or job titles or pay stubs. The work that lives in the space between 2 languages, holding them together. I opened chapter 7. The working title was The Invisible Translator. I had written the first paragraph 3 weeks earlier and then stopped because I could not figure out how to say what I wanted to say without it sounding like a complaint. But sitting at my kitchen table at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, full of the best aglio e olio I had ever made, I suddenly knew exactly how to say it. I wrote for 45 minutes. It flowed the way writing does, when you stop trying to be clever and just tell the truth about what it feels like to be essential and invisible at the same time. To be the reason things work and the last person anyone thinks about when things are working. To hold a bridge together with your bare hands and hear someone on the other side say, "Nice bridge, who built it?" and have no one point at you. I saved the document, closed the chapter, and then I did something I had not done in a very long time. I sat back and looked at what I had built. Not at Summit, here, on my laptop. 6.5 chapters of a book that nobody asked me to write and nobody was paying me to write and nobody even knew existed except my roommate, who once saw the title on my screen and said, "That sounds important," and then went back to watching a show about people renovating houses they could not afford. She was right, though. It was important. I just did not know how important it was going to become. I closed the book document, opened another folder on my desktop. This one was not creative. This one was clinical. 3 years ago, when the previous director at Summit, a woman named Helen Portman who actually understood how healthcare technology worked because she had spent 20 years doing it, asked me to set up a centralized coordination system for our major clients. I built it. A terminology database. A translation layer between our technical team and every hospital and clinic we served. Medical terms mapped to their technical equivalents. Technical alerts mapped to their clinical implications. Client preference profiles for every major account. Dr. Nakamura prefers Tuesday night updates. Dave Kowalski at Pinecrest only uses Slack. Mountain West's night shift charge nurse is Gloria, and she does not tolerate jargon. Pinecrest's backup authentication system requires a manual token refresh every 72 hours. Mountain West's prescription sync needs a manual restart every 48 hours because of ticket 47218 that engineering will get to approximately never. All of it. 3 years of institutional knowledge, organized, categorized, and stored in a system that exactly one person had access to. Not because I hoarded it, because nobody else ever asked. Nobody else needed to because nobody else ever logged in after 5 p.m. Nobody else ever got the 3 a.m. calls. Nobody else ever needed to know what Gloria's patience threshold was for technical explanations because nobody else was translating at 3 in the morning. Helen Portman set up the auto-escalation routing before she left. Alerts from Tier 1 clients, Mountain West and Pinecrest, auto-forwarded to my phone because I had configured it that way at Helen's request. Helen left. Patrick came in, and Patrick never asked how anything worked because Patrick assumed everything just worked. The way you assume the lights come on when you flip the switch without ever wondering what happens inside the wall. One database, one person, one very specific set of institutional knowledge that existed in my head, on my personal laptop, and exactly nowhere else in the Summit Health Technologies ecosystem. I was not going to sabotage anything. I was not going to delete anything. I was not going to change any passwords or lock anyone out or rearrange a single line of code. I was simply going to do my job. My actual, contractual, 8-to-5 job. And I was going to let the building figure out the rest. I closed the laptop, washed my pasta bowl, set my alarm, 7:15 a.m., and I went to bed knowing something that Patrick did not know. Something that nobody at Summit Health Technologies knew. I was the only person in that building who could speak both languages. And starting tomorrow, I was only going to speak one. Thursday morning, 7:58 a.m. I walked into Summit Health Technologies 2 minutes early, because boundaries do not mean you stop being professional. They mean you start being honest about what professional actually looks like when it is not subsidized by free labor. The morning was normal, aggressively normal, the kind of normal that felt almost suspicious, like the universe was holding its breath. I ran the daily monitoring sweep at 9, cleared 3 minor flags by 10:15, updated the client-facing status dashboard by 11, answered 6 internal tickets between 11 and noon, documented a patch cycle for Pinecrest's backup authentication system, forwarded 2 vendor invoices to accounting. Normal day, clean day, the kind of day that makes you wonder why you ever stayed past 5 in the first place. Lunch, pho, from the place on Larimer Street. The one with the broth that takes 18 hours and costs $14 and makes you briefly consider whether all other food is just a waste of time. I sat at the counter by the window and watched people walk by on the sidewalk. Denver in late September, the leaves just starting to turn. That specific Colorado light that makes even a parking meter look like it belongs in a photograph. I ate slowly. I did not check my phone. I tasted every single spoonful of that broth like a person who had just remembered that lunch is not a task to complete between tickets, it is a meal. And meals are for humans. And I was, despite what my work schedule had been suggesting for the past 4 years, a human. Back at the office by 12:55, 4 more tickets in the afternoon. A vendor call at 2:15 that took 11 minutes and could have taken 4 if the vendor had not insisted on telling me about his daughter's soccer tournament. I listened. Because that is what humans do. They listen to other humans talk about soccer tournaments even when there are tickets in the queue, and the tickets can wait because it was not 3 a.m., and I was not on my bedroom floor, and nobody's prescription data was at stake. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and the world was functioning exactly as it should. 4:55. I saved my work. 4:58. I closed my applications. Every window, every tab, every dashboard that had been open on my screen for so long, it had become part of the furniture. 4:59. I put my bag over my shoulder. The walk from my desk to the front door past the coffee machine. Ray Delgado was there. Of course he was. Ray was always at the coffee machine at 5 p.m. The way some people are always at church on Sunday. Not because they need to be, because it is where they go to observe. He watched me walk toward the door, checked his watch, not dramatically, just a glance. The way you glance at something you have been expecting. You leaving? It is 5, Ray. That is the plan. He looked at me for a long moment. Ray had eyes that had seen 12 years of Summit's nonsense, and they did not miss much. They had seen directors come and go. They had seen good people burn out and bad people fail up. They had seen every version of the thing I was doing right now, and they knew exactly what it meant. All right, Gallagher. All right. He did not ask. He did not try to talk me out of it. He just nodded. The way you nod at someone who has made a decision, you have been waiting for them to make for a very long time. And then he took a sip of his coffee and turned back to the machine like nothing had happened. Because for Ray, nothing had happened. Something had just finally stopped not happening. I drove home. Capitol Hill, $1,400 a month, second floor. Made a stir-fry with whatever was in the refrigerator, which turned out to be bell peppers, some broccoli that was optimistic about its remaining shelf life, and half a block of tofu that I cut into cubes with more precision than the situation required. Watched 2 episodes of a show I do not even remember, something about people buying houses in places they had never been to. The premise made no sense, but the host had good energy, and sometimes that is enough. My phone was on the kitchen counter, screen up, 5:43 p.m. The first ping, Pinecrest Clinic, Tier 1 alert, yellow, scheduling software throwing intermittent timeout errors. The same kind of thing I had been fixing from my bed, my couch, my car, my bathtub, and once from the bathroom at a friend's birthday dinner for 4 years and 3 months. I looked at the screen. My heart was doing this thing, this hammering, like I was committing a crime, like leaving your desk at 5 p.m. and not answering a work alert on your personal phone during your personal time in your personal apartment was some kind of federal offense. 4 years of conditioning will do that to you. 4 years of picking up, translating, fixing, saving, and never hearing thank you programs your nervous system to believe that silence is negligence. That not answering is the same as not caring. That your worth is measured by your availability, and your availability should be infinite because that is what reliable people do. They are available, always, for everyone, for free. I picked up my phone, read the alert, put the phone back down on the counter, and I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, the good kind, not the dusty tea bags that come in a box of 40 for $3. The loose leaf kind from the tea shop on South Broadway that costs $9 for 2 ounces and makes you feel like you have your life together even when the evidence suggests otherwise. 6:30. Aiden called. I watched his name appear on my screen. Aiden Cross, the man with the map. I let it ring. 6:52. Patrick called. I let that ring too. 7:15. Patrick again. 7:41. 8:07. 3 calls in 52 minutes. Each one a little more desperate than the last. I could tell by the ring pattern. The first call rings the full duration. The second hangs up after 4 rings. The third hangs up after 2. That is the sound of escalating panic translated into phone behavior. I was in the bathtub by then, a long one. Lavender Epsom salts from Target, $9.49. The kind that make you feel like you are at a spa that would charge you $9,000 and serve you cucumber water while someone whispers about your chakras. My bathroom smelled like a field in Provence, and my phone was buzzing on the kitchen counter through the closed door. Buzz, 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 like a fly that keeps hitting the same window over and over, too dumb to try a different one. Friday was worse. Or better. Depends on whether you are measuring it in dollars or in self-respect. Either way, the numbers were impressive. By 6:43 p.m., Friday, exactly 24 hours after the first Pinecrest alert I did not answer, I had 76 missed calls, 31 from Patrick, 17 from Aiden, 9 from Pinecrest Clinic directly, which meant someone at the clinic had bypassed our support system entirely and just started dialing numbers from the Summit contact page like a person trying every key on a ring until one of them opens something. The rest were various people from the office, 3 from numbers I did not recognize, and 1 from the front desk, which meant somebody was desperate enough to try the building's main line, which I did not even know still worked. I assumed it was decorative, like a fax machine. 76 missed calls. I have not been that popular since I accidentally RSVP'd yes to 3 weddings on the same weekend in 2021. I could not attend any of them. I was fixing a server migration for Mountain West on a Saturday for free. So technically I RSVP'd yes to 4 things and showed up to 0, which is either a character flaw or a labor violation depending on who you ask. But here is what happened between those 76 calls, and this is the part that matters, because the calls were just noise. The failures were the signal. Thursday night, after the Pinecrest scheduling alert I did not answer, Aiden Cross attempted to handle it himself. To his credit, he tried. He pulled up the Pinecrest account. He found the alert. He even identified the correct system. And then he did the thing that every tech person does when they do not know how to talk to a nurse. He called the Pinecrest charge nurse on duty and explained the situation using the language he knew, which was the wrong language. The exact words, according to the incident report filed the next morning, were approximately these. We are experiencing intermittent API latency in the scheduling module due to a back-end timeout that is cascading from a cache invalidation event. The estimated resolution window is 4 to 6 hours pending a diagnostic review. The charge nurse's name was Angela. She had been a nurse for 22 years. She had 3 patients waiting for scheduled procedures the following morning. One of them was a woman named Mrs. Patterson, who needed a chemotherapy session confirmed for Tuesday. Angela did not need to know about API latency. Angela did not care about cache invalidation. Angela needed to know one thing. Can I schedule Mrs. Patterson's chemotherapy for Tuesday, yes or no? Aiden could not answer that question. Not because he did not know the technical answer. He probably did. But he did not know how to translate it. He did not know how to take the language of servers and timeouts and cascade failures and turn it into the language of a nurse who has a patient in front of her and a schedule that needs to be confirmed before morning rounds. That was my job, the job I was not being paid to do, the job I was no longer doing after 5 p.m., the job Patrick said was just answering phones. Angela filed a formal complaint with Pinecrest administration by 9 a.m. Friday. The complaint described Summit's response as, and I am quoting from the document that was later shared in the emergency meeting, unhelpful, confusing, and indicative of a company that does not understand how healthcare operates. Unhelpful, confusing, indicative. 3 words that cost Summit its first SLA breach. $7,200, not a warning, not a let us discuss, real money, gone. Because the person Patrick called a phone answerer was the only one who knew how to say the same thing in 2 different languages and make both sides feel heard. $7,200. My annual raise request had been $4,800. Patrick denied it 7 months ago, said the budget was tight. The budget was not tight enough to lose $7,200 in a single incident, apparently. But it was too tight for a raise. Math is funny like that. It bends in whatever direction the person holding the calculator wants it to. Friday evening, I was home. Writing. Chapter 8 of the book. Working title, When the System Speaks and Nobody Listens. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of green tea and a candle that smelled like cedar and was supposed to improve focus, but mostly just made the apartment smell like a very small forest. My phone was on the counter. Buzzing. I did not look at it. I was in the middle of a paragraph about how healthcare technology fails, not because the technology is broken, but because the communication around it is, which, given the circumstances, felt almost prophetically on the nose. Saturday morning, 1:47 a.m. And I know the exact time because the alert log timestamps everything, which is both useful and deeply ironic when you realize that a computer has been keeping better track of my contributions than my boss ever did. Mountain West Medical. The prescription management system, the sync, the same sync I had been manually restarting every 48 hours for 14 months. The one that lived in my head and on my laptop and in no documentation that anyone at Summit had ever seen or asked about. The 48-hour window had passed. Nobody restarted it, because nobody knew it needed restarting. Because the only person who knew was at home, asleep, in an apartment that smelled faintly of cedar and chamomile, dreaming about absolutely nothing work-related for the first time in 4 years. The sync stalled. The backup drifted. The primary database kept updating while the backup fell behind. Hour by hour. Record by record. The gap between what the system showed and what was actually true widened like a crack in a windshield that everyone ignores until it reaches the other side. Aiden did not see the alert until 6:50 a.m., 5 hours and 3 minutes after it fired. To be fair, he was asleep, like a normal human being with a normal job and normal boundaries. The kind of boundaries that I had been told for 4 years were not available to me. But the job he was given was not normal. It was my job, and my job did not sleep. By the time Aiden logged in, the sync had been down long enough to trigger the SLA response window violation. Second breach, another $7,200. Doctors at 3 Mountain West clinics were writing prescriptions by hand. In 2025, by hand. Like it was 1987 and the height of medical technology was a pager and a prayer. Sunday, the day of rest. Unless you are a hospital, or the software that runs one, Or the person who used to keep that software running on Sundays for free, but is now at home making French toast and watching the morning light come through the kitchen window in that specific golden way it does in Denver when the weather is trying to apologize for what it is going to do in December. I made French toast that Sunday morning, brioche bread, real maple syrup, not the kind that comes in a bottle shaped like a woman and contains 0% maple and 100% regret. Powdered sugar on top because some days you just need powdered sugar. This was one of those days. At 8:22 a.m., while I was eating my second slice, Mountain West Medical's patient portal threw a timeout error during a shift change at 3 of their clinics. The portal is the system nurses use to pull patient records at the start of their shift, medication lists, allergy flags, treatment histories. The things you need to know before you walk into a patient's room and start doing the work of keeping them alive. For 52 minutes, that system was unavailable. 52 minutes during a shift change, which is the exact worst time for a system to go down because it is the moment when every nurse on every floor needs access simultaneously. It is the medical equivalent of the power going out during the Super Bowl, except instead of missing a touchdown, you are missing whether your patient is allergic to penicillin. 3 clinics, running on paper, nurses pulling physical charts from backup filing cabinets that had not been updated in months because the whole point of the digital system was that you did not need the filing cabinets anymore, except now you did, and the filing cabinets did not know that. SLA breach number 3, another $7,200. I did not know this was happening, not while it was happening. I found out later, the way I found out about most of the damage. Through Ray. Monday morning, coffee machine. Ray had a way of delivering catastrophic news with the same tone a weather forecaster uses to tell you it is going to rain. Factual, calm, slightly resigned. But the portal was not the worst of it. Not by a considerable margin. Because while the portal was timing out on Sunday morning, the consequences of something Aiden had done on Friday were still unfolding. And this part, I need you to understand this part, because this is where the story stops being about money and starts being about people. On Friday afternoon, before the weekend, Aiden had approved a software update for Mountain West's prescription management module, routine update, version patch, the kind of thing that happens every few weeks and usually goes smoothly because usually I was the one coordinating it. I was the one who checked compatibility with Mountain West's legacy systems. I was the one who knew that Mountain West was still running a secondary pharmacy verification layer from 2019 that had not been fully integrated with the newer modules. I was the one who knew that certain updates, if pushed without disabling that legacy layer first, would create a conflict between the old verification process and the new prescription database. Aiden did not know this. Aiden approved the update. The update pushed. The legacy layer conflicted, and for 6 hours, from approximately 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. Saturday, the prescription management system at 2 Mountain West Hospital campuses was showing incomplete medication data. 6 hours in a hospital, where the difference between the right medication and the wrong one is sometimes measured in milligrams, where a nurse checking a patient's prescription history needs to see everything, not most things, not the things the system feels like showing today, everything. And for 6 hours, the system was not showing everything. It was showing what it could retrieve from the primary database, while the conflicted legacy layer blocked access to the most recent updates. Nobody was hurt. I want to say that clearly because it matters. The nursing staff at Mountain West caught the discrepancies through their manual verification protocols, which exist precisely for situations like this. They are professionals. They are trained for system failures. They adapted, but they should not have had to. They should not have been put in a position where adapting to a software failure was necessary because the person who would have prevented it was the same person their vendor called a phone answerer. That was the part that sat in my chest like a stone. Not the SLA breaches, not Patrick's panic, the nurses, the patients. The fact that real people in real hospital beds were one manual verification step away from a medication error because my boss decided that the person holding 2 worlds together was a pipeline, not a destination. Dr. Ruth Nakamura called Patrick directly on Sunday afternoon. I did not hear the conversation, but Ray described it to me Monday morning in vivid, economical detail. He said Patrick's face during the call looked like a man who had just realized his parachute was a tablecloth. That image has lived in my head rent-free ever since. Dr. Nakamura told Patrick she was invoking the penalty clause. $21,600 in 3 days. 3 SLA breaches plus extended incident costs for the update failure. Her legal team was reviewing the contract for early termination options. Mountain West Medical paid Summit $23,800 a month. Pinecrest paid $18,500. Between the two, Summit was staring at losing $47,300 in monthly recurring revenue because one person started going home at 5. That Sunday night, 9:08 p.m., Dr. Nakamura left me a voicemail. I listened to it sitting on my couch, legs tucked under me, the television muted. Her voice was steady, tired. The kind of tired that does not come from lack of sleep, but from carrying too much responsibility for too long, which was something I understood better than most. Nora, it is Ruth. I know this probably is not your doing, and I know something is going on over there, but I need someone to pick up the phone. My board meets Monday, patients are being affected, and I would rather not explain to my board that our technology partner cannot function because they lost one person. I listened to that voicemail twice. Dr. Nakamura was not Patrick. She was not the problem. She was a doctor whose patients were being affected because my boss decided that the person who translated between two worlds was just answering phones. That was the part that kept me up. Not the 76 calls, not the penalties, not Patrick's tablecloth parachute, Ruth Nakamura, one specific person. Being affected by something she had nothing to do with. All right, hold on. Quick pause before I tell you what Patrick tried to pull next. If you are still here, you are my kind of person. I mean that. Hit subscribe if you have not already, and do me a favor. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is right now. I read every single one of those. Some of you are watching at 2 in the morning, and it makes my whole week knowing that someone out there is sitting in the dark with their phone propped up on a pillow, choosing my story over sleep. That is the highest compliment I have ever received, and I have been called irreplaceable on a legal document, so the bar is not low. Thank you, seriously. Okay, back to this mess. Monday morning, Patrick Doan learned something that most of us figure out by the time we finish middle school. Problems do not take weekends off, and the people who solve them do not forget how to be angry on Monday just because you ignored them since Tuesday. I walked into the office at 7:58. 2 minutes early, same as always. My desk was not empty. Patrick was sitting in my chair, at my desk, with his hands folded on my keyboard like a man who had watched a television show about assertive leadership and was trying to recreate a scene from memory. It did not work. It never works. Sitting in someone else's chair does not make you powerful. It makes you look like you do not have your own chair, which, metaphorically speaking, was becoming increasingly accurate. Where were you? His face was doing that thing where it tries to look angry and scared at the same time, which on Patrick resembled a man who had just walked into a sliding glass door and was trying to pretend the door started it. Your phone was off. We needed you. My phone was on. I was home. It was after 5. That is not how we work here, Gallagher. That is how my contract works. I said it calmly. Not cold. Not aggressive. The way you would tell someone the sky is blue. An observable, contractual, legally documented fact. Patrick stood up from my chair. Thank you, and pointed at me in a way that I think he believed was authoritative but mostly looked like he was accusing me of taking the last donut from the break room without asking. This is not over. And for once, Patrick was right about something. It was not over, because Patrick went to Human Resources that afternoon and filed a formal performance concern against me. And I am quoting directly from the document that Lydia Okafor later showed me. Failure to meet team expectations and endangering client relationships through deliberate disengagement. Deliberate disengagement. He actually used those words. The man who could not explain the difference between a server and a router without consulting a diagram found a way to use deliberate disengagement in a sentence. I would have been impressed if I were not the one being accused. Lydia Okafor, Human Resources Manager, 43 years old, efficient, neutral, the kind of person who owned exactly 2 facial expressions, processing and also processing. She was not on Patrick's side, she was not on mine. She was on Procedure's side, which at that moment was the best I could hope for. Lydia scheduled a meeting for Tuesday morning. Her office, third floor, beige walls, one plant that was either artificial or had made a deeply personal decision to stop trying, and a framed poster about teamwork featuring a rowing crew, which I have always hated because no one in a real office has ever looked at a rowing crew and felt inspired. You look at it and think, those people are cold and wet and someone is yelling at them, which actually is a fairly accurate metaphor for working at Summit Health Technologies. I sat in Lydia's office. She went through Patrick's complaint line by line: failure to respond to after-hours escalations, failure to support the team during critical client events, deliberate reduction of engagement. I waited until she finished. Then I asked one question. Lydia, can you show me where after-hours monitoring is listed in my job description? She pulled up the document. Read it. Read it again. Her second facial expression appeared. It is not listed. I told her my compensation was $49,600, coordinator level, while the role that actually includes after-hours monitoring and client escalation management pays between $78,000 and $85,000. I had been performing director-level work at support pay for over 2 years. I was not refusing to work. I was working my contracted hours. Lydia wrote something down, looked at Patrick's complaint, looked at my job description, wrote something else down. She was a woman who processed things the way a printer processes a large document, methodically, silently, with the occasional pause that makes you wonder if she has frozen entirely. I will review this and follow up, she said. Not a win, not a loss, a holding pattern. I left that office feeling like I had thrown a punch into a cloud. Technically, I had done something, but I could not tell if it landed. And then, because Monday had apparently decided it was not finished with me, the hallway happened. Patrick had been busy, not fixing the SLA breaches. That would have required understanding how things worked. No, Patrick had been busy talking, to department heads, to team leads, to anyone who would listen, and several people who were just trying to microwave soup in the break room. His narrative was simple. Nora Gallagher is quiet quitting. She has checked out. She is punishing the team because she did not get the promotion. She is selfish. She is putting patients at risk over a grudge. By 3 p.m., 3 people I had considered work friends looked at me differently. One of them was a network analyst named Jason Park. Jason, who I had once spent 3 hours helping rewrite a client report on a Friday night because he had a deadline Monday and his data was a mess, and I stayed because that is what I did. I stayed. For everyone. For free. Jason stopped by my desk that afternoon. Hey, Gallagher. I heard you are just phoning it in now. I am working my contracted hours, Jason. He shrugged. The kind of shrug that says, I do not want to get involved and I already picked a side at the same time. The kind of shrug you give when loyalty costs something and you have decided you cannot afford it. I watched him walk back to his desk. And I thought about that Friday night. 3 hours. His report. His deadline. My time. My Friday night. And a shrug. Mia Torres, 25 years old, earnest, eager, the kind of employee who volunteers for everything because she has not yet learned that volunteering gets you more volunteering and not more money. She had been at Summit for 8 months. She brought homemade cookies to team meetings. She used exclamation points in emails the way some people use punctuation, which is to say constantly and with great enthusiasm. She once described a server reboot as exciting, which is either a sign of genuine passion for technology or a sign that someone needs to get out more. I liked Mia. That is the part that makes this harder. Tuesday night, 11:52 p.m., a Tier 2 alert fired, secondary server at a smaller client throwing disk space warnings, not catastrophic, not even urgent, the kind of alert that could sit in the queue until morning and nobody would notice except the server itself, and servers do not have feelings, despite what my roommate once suggested after watching a documentary about artificial intelligence that I think she misunderstood. Mia saw the alert on her phone because Mia was the kind of person who kept her work notifications on at midnight because she believed that responsiveness equaled value. Give her 3 years, she would learn. She fixed it. Cleared the disk space, ran a quick diagnostic, documented the resolution. Took her maybe 20 minutes. Fine. Good. Normal. And then she sent an email to the entire operations distribution list at 12:20 a.m. with the subject line, "Got this covered team," followed by a flexed bicep emoji. The emoji. The emoji is what killed me, because now Patrick had ammunition, not just the narrative, Proof. Other people step up. Other people do not refuse to help. Other people do not abandon the team at 5 o'clock and ignore their phones while the building burns. He did not even have to say it. The email said it for him. A 25-year-old with a flexed bicep emoji had just done more for Patrick's argument than his entire HR complaint. My fault. Entirely my fault. I never told Mia what I was doing. I never warned her. I never pulled her aside and said, "Hey, I need you to not be a hero for a few days while I prove a point that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with the fact that I have been holding this building together with duct tape and good intentions for 4 years." I assumed she would do what everyone else had been doing for years. Ignore the alert, go back to sleep. But Mia was 25 and still believed that going above and beyond would be noticed and rewarded. Give her time. She would learn the difference between being noticed and being used. We all do. And then there was the other thing. The thing that made the SLA breaches and the missed calls and Jason's shrug look like minor inconveniences by comparison. Aiden Cross. In the process of trying to manage 2 Tier 1 client accounts that he did not understand, using systems he had not mastered for clients he had never met, sent the wrong data report. Mountain West Medical's monthly operational summary went to Pinecrest Clinic. Pinecrest Clinic's monthly operational summary went to Mountain West. 2 healthcare clients, each receiving confidential operational data about the other. Patient-adjacent data, utilization metrics, system performance logs that included references to specific departments, specific clinics, specific operational vulnerabilities. The kind of mistake that makes compliance officers develop stress headaches and lawyers start clearing their Tuesday afternoon calendars. The kind of mistake that has 4 letters and starts with H and ends with someone from legal calling, a meeting that nobody wants to attend. HIPAA. Or close enough to it that the distinction would require a lawyer to explain, and if you need a lawyer to explain why something is not a violation, it is probably close enough to be a problem. Aiden was not stupid. I want to say that again because I think it matters. He was drowning. He had been handed a senior position in a system he did not understand, with clients he had never spoken to, using tools he had never been trained on, in an industry where the difference between a good day and a lawsuit is sometimes measured in a single misrouted email. He was drowning because the person who would have trained him, the person who would have caught the report before it went out, the person who knew which data went where and why, was the same person Patrick called a phone answerer. Tuesday night, after the Mia email, after the data mix-up, after all of it, I sat in my car in the Summit parking lot, engine running, heater on low. That specific kind of darkness you only get in office parking lots at night. Orange sodium lights turning everything, the color of old photographs. The kind of light that makes you look at your own hands on the steering wheel and wonder whose hands they are and what those hands are doing here at 10:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, in a parking lot in Denver. I sat there for 40 minutes. 40 minutes of asking myself questions I did not want to answer. Maybe Patrick was right. Maybe I was just a support specialist. Maybe $49,600 was what I was worth. And the 137 after-hours interventions were just what you do, what reliable people do, what the person who speaks both languages does, because that is who they are, and you do not get to stop being who you are just because someone told you that who you are is not enough. Maybe I should be grateful for the steady paycheck and the dental plan and the parking spot that was destroying my windshield. Maybe I should open my phone and type Health Tech Support Jobs Denver into the search bar and start over somewhere nobody would know me, and I could be someone else's bridge until that bridge wore out too. I almost did it. I almost drove home, opened my laptop, and started looking. But my brain, that stubborn, sleep-deprived, pasta-fueled brain, it kept circling back to one thing. Not the voicemail, not the 76 calls, not Jason's shrug, not Mia's emoji. Page 2. Paragraph 3. Patrick's own words, his own signature. Filed with Human Resources 3 months ago. Irreplaceable. He wrote that. He signed it. He submitted it to the same Human Resources department where he was now trying to file a performance concern against me for doing exactly what my contract said. Patrick built this trap himself. I was just the one who stopped holding the door open. My phone buzzed. Not a work alert this time. Not Patrick. Not Aiden. Not Mia Torres and her weaponized emoji. Chloe. My sister. Not a text. A call. which was unusual because Chloe's preferred method of communication was a text message, followed by 3 more text messages clarifying the first one, followed by a voice memo she did not mean to send, followed by a text that said, "Ignore that voice memo." A call meant something different. I was still in the parking lot, engine still running, orange light still turning my hands the color of a memory I had not made yet. I picked up. "Hey." Her voice was quiet, softer than usual. The way Chloe sounds when she has been thinking about something for a while and has finally decided to say it out loud, which does not happen often because Chloe typically says things out loud approximately 2 seconds after thinking them, which is both her greatest strength and the reason she once told a waiter his restaurant's music was terrible while we were still sitting in the restaurant. "Hey, Nor. I figured out the insurance thing." "Yeah?" "Yeah. It was not even that hard. I called the number on the back of the card, and they walked me through the whole network thing. Liam's dermatologist is in network. Appointment is next Thursday." She paused. I never tried. Because you always did it. And it was easier to just let you do it because you are good at it, and I told myself that meant I was not supposed to be good at it. But I am. Or I can be. I just never had to be because you never said no. Another pause. Longer this time. "I am sorry, Nora." My throat tightened, which was annoying because I was in a parking lot having a professional crisis, and I did not need my sister making me feel things on top of everything else. "It is okay, Chloe. Are you all right? You sound tired." "I am tired, but I am okay." We talked for 7 minutes about nothing. The weather in Fort Collins versus Denver, which is a conversation that can last anywhere from 30 seconds to 45 minutes depending on whether you bring up wind, and Chloe brought up wind. Her youngest lost a tooth and sold it to the tooth fairy for $5, which Chloe said was inflation, and I said was negotiation skills, and we both agreed was Trevor's fault because he set the price during a weak moment after bedtime. Trevor's girls' volleyball team lost their last match 8-1. Chloe said the 1 point was a moral victory. I said the 1 point was geometry. 7 minutes of normal. It helped more than she knew. More than I would have admitted to anyone, including myself, sitting in a parking lot in Denver with the engine running and the heater making that rattling sound it makes when it has been on too long. I hung up, turned off the engine, got out of the car, and I walked back into the building. Not because I had to. Because I had something to do. I went to my desk, opened my personal laptop, opened the book, not the work documentation, not the ticket system, the book, my book, Chapter 7, the one I had written at my kitchen table after the pasta, the one called The Invisible Translator. I read the opening paragraph, the one I had written 3 weeks ago and then finished that Thursday night when the words finally came. The best translators are invisible. That is the design. You do not thank the bridge for not collapsing. You do not write a thank you card to the person who stands between 2 languages and holds them together with nothing but context and patience and an understanding of both worlds that neither world fully appreciates. You just cross, and you keep walking. And the bridge holds. Until one day the bridge decides to ask why it is the only one holding. I stared at that paragraph for a long time. And I realized something that should have been obvious but was not. I was not just living this story, I was writing it. I had been writing it for 8 months without understanding that the book was not about other people. It was about me. Every chapter, every invisible translator I had interviewed or imagined or described, they were all me. And the chapter I had not written yet, the one about what happens when the translator finally speaks in her own language, that was the chapter I was about to live. I closed the laptop. I pulled out the folder from the bottom drawer, the one with Patrick's performance review. I opened it, looked at his handwriting, looked at the word irreplaceable, and then I went home, sat at my kitchen table, and built my case. 5 documents, printed, organized, each one a piece of the truth that Patrick had been too comfortable to see. Job description, compensation breakdown, 137 interventions, performance review, financial analysis. I bought a new folder, Manila, 2-pronged. Not because the folder mattered, but when you are about to fight for your career, you want your papers to feel like they have their act together, even if you are not entirely sure you do. Wednesday morning, I walked past Mia Torres in the hallway. She was carrying coffee and smiling the way she always smiled, like the sun had just come up and she was personally responsible. Did you see my email? I caught that alert Tuesday night. I am getting the hang of this, right? I looked at her. She was so genuinely proud, enthusiastic, well-meaning, a golden retriever in human form who had accidentally knocked over a vase and was wagging her tail at the mess. Yeah, I said. You did great, Mia. I meant it, and I hated that I meant it, because meaning it made everything more complicated. And complicated was the last thing I needed on the morning I was about to walk into conference room A with a manila folder and the rest of my career balanced on 5 pieces of paper. Wednesday morning. 1 week since Patrick told me I answered phones for a living. 7 days since I set that alarm labeled 8 to 5. And in those 7 days, Summit Health Technologies had managed to accomplish what I had spent 4 years preventing: chaos. 4 SLA breaches, $28,800 in penalties. 2 Tier 1 clients, Mountain West Medical at $23,800 a month and Pinecrest Clinic at $18,500, both under formal contract review. That is $47,300 of recurring monthly revenue sitting on a table in a glass-walled conference room on the 4th floor, waiting for someone to explain how it got there. And somewhere in the background, a potential HIPAA incident involving swapped client reports was being quietly examined by Summit's legal team because apparently Aiden Cross could not tell the difference between 2 spreadsheets. The meeting was called for 10 o'clock sharp by Sandra Kim, Vice President of Client Operations. Sandra was mid-50s, silver stud earrings, the kind of executive who wore reading glasses on a chain not because she needed them on a chain, but because the visual made junior managers sit up straighter. She had been with Summit for 9 years. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Conference room A seated 12. That morning it held 8 people and enough tension to power the building's HVAC system through January. Sandra sat at the head of the table. Patrick Doan was on her left, tie slightly crooked, coffee untouched, fingers tapping the side of his mug in a rhythm that suggested either anxiety or a very niche jazz appreciation. Lydia Okafor sat in the corner near the window with a legal pad open to a fresh page, pen uncapped, expression set to documenting. 2 department heads filled the middle seats, one with a gray mustache who ran infrastructure, one with wireframe glasses from the finance team. Aiden Cross occupied the farthest chair from Sandra, which told you everything about his week. He looked like a man who had not slept since Friday, because he had not slept since Friday. Ray Delgado leaned against the back wall with a paper cup, not technically invited but somehow present, the way Ray always was when something important was about to happen. I sat in the second chair from the right. Manila folder on the table. 5 documents inside. Hands steady. Sandra opened with facts, not feelings. 4 SLA breaches in 6 days. $28,800 in direct penalties. 2 Tier 1 clients formally reviewing their contracts. 1 potential HIPAA incident under legal examination. Combined monthly revenue at risk, $47,300. She placed both hands flat on the table. Someone in this room is going to tell me what happened. Accurately. The room went quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the HVAC cycling and someone's phone vibrating in a pocket they think is on silent. Patrick spoke first. Of course he did. He had been rehearsing for this the way most people rehearse for wedding toasts. Too many notes, not enough truth. He used the word accountability 3 times in his opening sentence. He referenced operational ownership as though it were a Fortune 500 buzzword and not something you could buy embroidered on a throw pillow. He talked about shifting priorities and transitional challenges. And then, 14 seconds into his monologue, I counted he pivoted to me. Nora has, unfortunately, chosen to disengage from the collaborative culture that made our team successful, he said. He actually straightened his tie when he said it, like a newscaster delivering breaking weather. Her refusal to participate in after-hours operational support has created gaps that the team is still working to fill. Sandra raised one hand. Not dramatically. Just enough. Patrick stopped mid-breath. Nora, Sandra said. Your perspective. I opened the folder. Document 1, I said. My job description signed by Patrick Doan 14 months ago. Title: Client Support Specialist. Core responsibilities: client communication, ticket management, vendor liaison, monthly reporting. Core hours: 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. I placed it on the table. You will notice that after-hours monitoring, emergency system response, and weekend client training do not appear anywhere on this page. Not in the primary duties. Not in the supplementary duties. Not in the footnotes. Sandra picked up the page and read it. The room waited. Document 2, I continued. Compensation analysis. My current salary is $49,600. The market rate for a client success director in the Denver metro area, which is the role I have functionally been performing, ranges from $78,000 to $85,000. That is a gap of $28,400 at the low end. The finance department head adjusted his glasses. I saw him write something on the pad in front of him. Document 3. I set down the printed log. 137 after-hours interventions over the past 8 months. That averages to approximately 4 per week. Server restarts, client escalations, SLA saving responses, training sessions for nursing staff. None of these were compensated. None were acknowledged in any formal review until this document. I tapped the page. The timestamps are verified against Summit's own ticketing system. Sandra looked at the log for a long moment. Then she looked at Patrick. 4 times a week, she said, for 8 months, unpaid. Patrick opened his mouth. Sandra did not invite him to continue. Document 4, I said, and I held it up so the room could see the header. It was the performance review, the one Patrick had filed with HR 3 months ago, the one that contained a sentence I had memorized, the way some people memorize scripture. I read it aloud, slowly, because I wanted every syllable to land in that glass-walled room like a stone dropping into still water. Nora Gallagher is the single most indispensable member of the client-facing team. Her ability to bridge the gap between technical infrastructure and clinical operations is irreplaceable. I set the page down. Patrick wrote that, signed it, filed it with Human Resources. 3 months before he told me I was not ready for a promotion. The fluorescent lights hummed. Ray Delgado took a sip from his paper cup. Lydia Okafor's pen had not stopped moving. I reached for the 5th document. The 5th document was not a complaint. It was not a resignation letter. It was not a dramatic mic drop printed on company letterhead, though I will admit the thought had crossed my mind somewhere around Tuesday evening between my 2nd cup of chamomile and my 3rd chapter revision. It was a financial analysis. 1 page, single-spaced, 12 rows of numbers that I had pulled from Summit Health Technologies' own internal billing system, cross-referenced against the client contracts I had helped on board, and verified against the ticketing platform that logged every intervention I had performed for the past 4 years. I placed it on the table and slid it toward Sandra Kim. This is a cost-impact summary, I said. It covers the 7 days since Aiden Cross assumed the client success director role. Sandra picked it up. The room leaned forward, not physically, not all of them, but the energy shifted the way air shifts before a thunderstorm in the foothills west of Denver. You feel it in your chest before you see the clouds. Line 1, I continued. SLA breach penalties assessed, $28,800. 4 breaches at $7,200 each. Mountain West accounts for 3. Pinecrest accounts for 1. Sandra's eyes moved down the page. Patrick's did not. Patrick was looking at me the way a man looks at a smoke detector that has been beeping for 6 days and has finally caught his attention because the kitchen is now on fire. Line 2. Revenue under formal review, $47,300 per month. Mountain West at $23,800. Pinecrest at $18,500. Combined with 2 smaller accounts flagged for quality concerns, the total exposure rises to $51,900 monthly. The finance department head stopped writing. He looked up. That was the number that moved him. Not the penalties, not the HIPAA incident, but the monthly exposure. Because finance people do not think in events. They think in recurring losses. Line 3, I said. Estimated cost of my after-hours labor over the past 8 months, calculated at the median market rate for a client success director in the Denver metro area. 137 interventions. Average duration, 43 minutes. Some as short as 12 minutes. Some like the Christmas Eve authentication failure at Pinecrest, lasting 2 hours and 15 minutes. I paused. At $81,500 annually, which is the midpoint of the $78,000 to $85,000 range, the hourly equivalent is approximately $39.18. Multiply by 98.1 total hours of after-hours work. The value of unpaid labor I provided to Summit Health Technologies is $3,842.60. I let that number sit. It was not a large number. That was the point. $3,842, Sandra repeated quietly. And 60 cents, I said. That is what it would have cost Summit to compensate me fairly for the work that prevented every one of these breaches for 8 months. Less than a single SLA penalty. Less than half of the raise I requested and was denied. Patrick denied a $4,800 raise request 11 months ago. The first SLA breach cost $7,200. I will let the math speak for itself. The gray mustache infrastructure head exhaled through his nose. It was the loudest sound in conference room A since Sandra had stopped Patrick's monologue. Lydia Okafor wrote something on her legal pad, circled it, and underlined it twice. I could not see what it said, but the pen pressure suggested it was not a grocery list. Sandra set the document down. She looked at Patrick. You denied a raise request of $4,800. Patrick shifted in his chair. The budget cycle at the time did not support. The budget cycle, Sandra said, and the way she said it made the phrase sound like something you would find at the bottom of a clearance bin at a store that was going out of business. She turned back to me. Nora, what are you asking for? I had rehearsed this part, not in the mirror, not with flashcards, but in my head during those 40 minutes in the parking lot, during the pasta night, during the bath with the lavender Epsom salts, during every chapter of my book where I wrote about people who translated between two worlds and were compensated for neither. 3 things, I said. First, a formal reclassification of my role to Client Success Director, effective immediately, with a salary adjustment to $82,400, which falls within market range and reflects the work I have been performing for over 2 years. Sandra nodded. Not agreement, acknowledgement. She was listening. Second, a formal policy requiring that any employee performing duties outside their job description for more than 30 consecutive days receives a role review and compensation adjustment, not just for me. For Mia Torres, who answered a midnight server alert after 8 months on the job because nobody told her she did not have to. For Ray Delgado, who has been mentoring junior staff without a training title for a decade, I glanced at Ray. He raised his paper cup an inch. That was Ray's standing ovation. Third, I took a breath. A written acknowledgement from Human Resources that the after-hours work I performed was neither required by my contract nor compensated, and that my decision to work within my contracted hours does not constitute disengagement, quiet quitting, or any other term Patrick has used in hallway conversations this week. The room was still. Aidan Cross stared at the table. He had not spoken a single word during the entire meeting, and honestly, that was the smartest thing he had done since arriving at Summit. Sandra collected all 5 documents, squared them against the table edge, and placed them in front of her. She looked at Lydia. Schedule a follow-up for Thursday. Nora, Patrick, myself, and legal. She looked at Patrick. Do not speak to Nora about this matter outside of that meeting. Patrick's coffee was still untouched. It had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Somewhere in that ceramic mug was a metaphor about leadership, but I was too tired to write it. I picked up my empty folder, stood, and walked out of conference room A. The hallway was 62 steps back to my desk. I had counted them once before, the day Patrick summoned me to his office. This time they felt shorter, not because the building had changed, because I had... Thursday arrived the way most important days do without ceremony. No dramatic thunderstorm over the Front Range, no ominous music playing in the elevator. Just a regular March morning in Denver, 41 degrees, partly cloudy, the kind of weather that cannot decide what it wants to be, which felt appropriate given the circumstances. I wore the navy blazer, not because I needed armor, but because it had pockets deep enough to hold my phone and my hands at the same time, and I suspected I would need both hidden at various points during the day. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock. Conference room A again. Same glass walls, same fluorescent lights. Same faint hum of the HVAC system that I had once spent 45 minutes troubleshooting on a Saturday because the facilities team could not figure out why the thermostat was reading 6 degrees too warm and someone needed to call the quarter vendor and explain the problem in language that was neither pure engineering nor pure complaint. I arrived at Summit Health Technologies at 7:58, same as every morning that week, same monitoring sweep at 9, same tickets before noon. Same lunch this time, a turkey sandwich from the deli on 17th Street, $7.50, extra pickles, eaten at my desk because I did not feel like making conversation with anyone in the break room. At 1:45, I walked to the fourth floor. Ray Delgado was standing near the stairwell with his paper cup. He did not say anything. He just nodded. I nodded back. That was our entire conversation, and it was exactly enough. Conference room A at 2 o'clock held 5 people. Sandra Kim at the head, reading glasses on, a thin stack of documents arranged in front of her with the precision of someone who had spent the previous evening preparing. Patrick Doan on her left, wearing a tie that was straight for the first time all week, which meant either his wife had helped him or he had watched a YouTube tutorial, and I genuinely could not decide which was sadder. Lydia Okafor in her usual corner seat, legal pad open, pen uncapped. A woman I had not met before sat beside Lydia, mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, charcoal suit, no jewelry except a silver watch. She introduced herself as Catherine Voss, Associate General Counsel. I sat across from Patrick. Manila folder on the table, empty this time. Everything I needed to say was already in Sandra's stack. Sandra started without preamble. I have reviewed all 5 documents Nora submitted yesterday, along with internal records from HR, the ticketing system, and the client contracts database. Catherine has reviewed the legal implications. Lydia has reviewed the HR file. She looked at Patrick. I want to begin with you. Patrick straightened. He had prepared remarks. I could see the folded paper in his breast pocket. 2 pages, handwritten, the kind of notes a person writes at midnight when they realize the narrative they built is collapsing and they need a new one by morning. Sandra, I want to be clear, he said. My decision regarding the director role was based on strategic considerations. Aidan Cross brought external perspective, fresh methodology, and a track record of Patrick. Sandra removed her reading glasses. That was the signal. Everyone in the room knew it. When Sandra Kim took off her glasses, the next sentence was not going to be a question. Aidan Cross has been in the role for 9 days. In those 9 days, Summit has incurred $28,800 in SLA penalties, a potential HIPAA violation from swapped client reports, and formal contract review notices from both Mountain West Medical and Pinecrest Clinic. Our total monthly revenue exposure is $51,900. She put the glasses back on. I am not interested in strategic considerations. I am interested in what happened and what happens next. Catherine Voss opened a folder of her own. From a legal standpoint, she said, and her voice had the calm, unhurried quality of someone who bills by the hour and has never needed to rush, the company's exposure falls into 3 categories. First, the SLA penalties are contractually binding and non-negotiable. $28,800 is already assessed. Second, the HIPAA incident involving the swapped reports is under review. If it is classified as a reportable breach, the fine range begins at $100 per violation and can escalate to $50,000 per violation, depending on severity and negligence. Third, Dr. Ruth Nakamura's legal team has formally requested documentation of Summit's internal response, which suggests Mountain West is building a record for potential contract termination. The room absorbed that the way rooms absorb bad news silently, with a slight shift in posture from everyone except the person delivering it. Sandra turned to me. Nora, yesterday you made 3 requests. I want to address each one. I folded my hands on the table. Steady. First. Effective immediately, your title is reclassified to Client Success Director. Your salary is adjusted to $82,400, retroactive to the 1st of this month. HR will process the paperwork by end of business Friday. I did not react, not because I did not feel anything, but because the feeling was too large for a glass conference room and fluorescent lights. It was the kind of feeling that needed space, a parking lot at night, or a kitchen at 10 o'clock with garlic and olive oil, or a bathtub with lavender salts and a phone buzzing on the counter. Second, Sandra continued, I am implementing a quarterly role audit policy. Any employee performing duties outside their documented job description for more than 30 consecutive days will trigger an automatic review. Lydia will draft the framework by end of month. Lydia nodded without looking up. Her pen kept moving. Third, Catherine Voss placed a single sheet of paper on the table and slid it toward me. This is a written acknowledgement from Summit Health Technologies stating that your decision to perform work within your contracted hours did not constitute disengagement, insubordination, or performance deficiency. It further acknowledges that after-hours work performed between June of last year and this month was voluntary, uncompensated, and outside the scope of your signed job description. I read every word, every clause, every carefully constructed sentence that said, in legal language, what I had been saying in my own language for 9 days. I was not the problem. I was the solution they forgot to pay for. I signed it. Sandra looked at Patrick. Patrick, effective Monday, you will report to me directly for a 90-day performance review period. Your management of this situation, including the denied raise request and the subsequent HR complaint against Nora, will be part of that review. Patrick said nothing. His prepared remarks stayed in his pocket. His coffee, once again, sat untouched. I stood, collected the signed acknowledgement, and walked toward the door. 62 steps back to my desk. I knew the number by heart now. Friday morning, I woke up at 6:15. Not because an alert pulled me out of sleep. Not because Pinecrest's scheduling system decided to forget how time zones work. Not because Mountain West's prescription sync stalled at the 48-hour mark, and someone meaning me needed to restart it before 14 clinics opened their doors to 900 patients who trusted that their 90 friend medications were correct. I woke up because my body decided it was time to wake up, and for the first time in 4 years, that felt like enough of a reason. The apartment was quiet. Capitol Hill quiet, which is not real quiet. There was still the garbage truck on 12th Avenue making its rounds, and the neighbor's cat doing whatever cats do at 6 in the morning that requires slamming into a screen door, but it was my kind of quiet. The kind where the silence belongs to you because you are not waiting for it to be interrupted. I made coffee. Not the break room coffee that tasted like someone had brewed it through a recycled manila folder. Real coffee. Whole beans from that roaster on South Broadway, $14 a bag, the one with the hand-drawn mountain on the label. I ground them myself. I used the French press that had been sitting on my counter for 2 years because I had never once had a morning slow enough to use it. 7 minutes. That is how long a French press takes. I stood in my kitchen and waited 7 minutes, and nothing caught fire. I drove to Summit Health Technologies for the last time as a client support specialist. Monday, I would badge in as client success director. Same building. Same parking spot, 3rd row, near the dumpster, because seniority at Summit apparently applied to everything except parking assignments. Same 62 steps from the front door to my desk. But the nameplate would be different, and the direct deposit amount would be different. And the contract in HR's filing cabinet would finally match the work I had been doing since before Aiden Cross knew what a prescription sync replication service was. Speaking of Aiden, he was reassigned to a junior account management role. Not fired, not humiliated. Sandra Kim was not that kind of leader, and honestly, Aiden was not a bad person. He was a qualified professional placed in a role that required a very specific kind of knowledge, the kind you cannot learn from a LinkedIn certification or a 12-slide deck with 9 typos. He needed time. He needed training. He needed someone to explain that Dave Kowalski at Pinecrest only responds on Slack, and that doctor. Nakamura's Tuesday night update rule is not written down anywhere because some rules exist only in the memory of the person who learned them the hard way. That person was still me. The difference now was that I would be paid for it. Mia Torres stopped by my desk at 9:30 with a small cactus in a terracotta pot. There was a sticky note on it that read, "For the director," with a smiley face. She did not know the full story. She did not need to. She just knew that something had shifted, and she wanted to be kind about it. I put the cactus next to my monitor, between the cold coffee mug and the stress ball, shaped like a cloud that Ray had given me 2 Christmases ago. Ray. He came by at 11 with his paper cup. Heard the news, he said. Yeah. About time. Yeah. He tapped the edge of my desk twice with his knuckle, the way you knock on a door you already know is open, and walked back to his station. 12 years at Summit, and that man had turned brevity into an art form. At lunch I called Chloe. She picked up on the second ring, which for Chloe was practically sprinting to the phone. I told her about the new title, the salary, the meeting. She was quiet for about 4 seconds, which was a Chloe record. And then she said, "Nora, I am going to cry, and if you tell Trevor I cried, I will deny it and also stop sharing my Netflix password." I laughed. A real one. the kind that starts in your stomach and does not care who hears it. At 4:55, I saved my last file. At 4:58, I closed my laptop. At 4:59, I put it in my bag. At 5 o'clock, I stood up. But this time, before I walked those 62 steps to the front door, I opened my personal laptop and read the last paragraph of Chapter 7 of my book, the chapter called The Invisible Translator. The one I had written in 45 minutes on a Thursday night after pasta aglio e olio with 6 cloves of garlic and $11 olive oil. The paragraph read, "Translation is not about speaking two languages. It is about standing in the space between two people who cannot understand each other and choosing to build a bridge instead of a wall. The bridge does not get your name on it. The bridge does not get a plaque. But without the bridge, the two sides remain apart, and eventually they forget there was ever a crossing at all." I closed the laptop. I walked the 62 steps. I pushed open the front door of Summit Health Technologies, and the Denver air hit my face 44 degrees, clear sky, the mountains visible to the west the way they are only when the wind has swept everything else out of the way. I was the bridge. I had always been the bridge. The only thing that changed was that someone finally looked down and realized what they were standing on. My name is Nora Gallagher. I am 31 years old. I make $82,400 a year. I am writing a book called Lost in Translation: When Tech Meets Healthcare. I live in Capitol Hill, Denver, Colorado, and my rent is $1,400 a month, and my French press makes perfect coffee in exactly 7 minutes. And if you are the person in your building who speaks both languages, the doctor and the developer, the nurse and the network, the human and the system know this. Your silence is not loyalty. Your exhaustion is not dedication. And your worth is not determined by the person who forgot to pay for it. It is 5:01. I am clocking out, and this time I am not coming back at 3 in the morning. If this story reminded you of someone you know or someone you are, share it. Leave a comment about the moment you decided your work deserved more than silence. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. And the next time someone tells you that you are not ready, ask them one question. Ready compared to what? I will see you in the next one.